So as Vivian has indicated, we have recently published a policy brief where we were looking at, the changes that have happened, the positive developments in terms of SRHR relating to vulnerable marginalized groups, including key populations. So there are quite a lot, and we are doing this focusing on 8 countries in Africa. And Malawi is one of the countries of focus. So here we are just going to highlight some of the issues with Malawi. I'm going to share. Okay. Let me just hang on. Okay. Let me share. I'm having a little bit of problems here. Okay. So, this is the cover of the policy brief. As you can see, the focus was on Kenya, Lesotho, Malawi, Nigeria, Tanzania, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Uganda. So we're having a series of webinars where we are just sharing our findings from these countries. You are also welcome to join the webinars for the other countries as well. So just to set the scene in terms of our background to the legal environment in Malawi, we have sexual reproductive health rights, and just as a general informer, what sexual reproductive health rights are is just the application of human rights to sexuality, sexual health, reproduction, and reproductive health. So essentially, they are not new rights. These are just human rights that have already existed, but in particular, focusing on sexual health and reproduction and reproductive health. So these rights are already guaranteed in major international treaties, and these treaties are treaties that Malawi is party to. And it includes the CEDAW, which is the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, African Charter on Human and People's Rights, and what we call the Maputo Protocol, which is the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the rights of women in Africa. And these rights, when you look at them as a group, they include the right to health, and the Committee for the Economic, Cultural, and Social Rights has published guidelines in which they talk about how the right to health includes sexual and reproductive health. They include the right to found a family, free consent, bodily autonomy and integrity, the right to make free, informed decisions about reproduction, the right to know and to make decisions about family planning, freedom from violence, including sexual violence. So these are, when you find them, normally these are the rights that are directly talking to sexual and reproductive health. However, there are other rights that are indirect. As we know, as we always talk about when we're talking about human rights are generally, taken together. They are indivisible. So one right might affect the enjoyment of other rights or improve the enjoyment of other rights. So some of these indirect rights include access to information, which, for example, improves the ability to make decisions about reproduction and family planning when you know the information that you need to make decisions about. The right to equality and non-discrimination is very, very important, in that everything that then happens with regard to the laws that the state makes, everything has to ensure that if everyone is equal, treated equally, and that there is no discrimination. The right to privacy is also implicated because we always talk about the decisions that we make in our own personal lives, decisions relating to sexuality, reproductive health are always things that we make in private. So when we're talking about the right to privacy, it's also very important. The right to life in many, many different instances. So for example, when we're talking about access to healthcare for women, when we talk about maternal mortality, when women die during pregnancy or from pregnancy complications, that implicates the right to life. We also talk about the quality of life as something that is relevant. And the most important, I think we always talk about the right to human dignity. The right to human dignity most often in many contexts talks about the right to be free from inhuman and degrading treatment, to be free from torture. So this is also important when it comes to sexual and reproductive health. For example, there are cases where people are forced to be sterilized, or they are forced to have an abortion, or they are forced to keep a pregnancy that impacts their dignity and their health. So at the end of the day, some of this might amount to cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment. So that's why these rights are also important when we're talking about sexual reproductive health. Now, with regard to the Malawi Constitution, so we don't have a section that specifically says everyone in Malawi has the right to sexual and reproductive health. However, there are rights that are recognized in the Constitution, like I said, that have an impact in terms of the enjoyment of sexual and reproductive health. So you have the right to non-discrimination on many grounds, including gender, economic, social status, and there's a provision that says other status, which means that if you're able to show that you are being discriminated against on compelling grounds, that then becomes an important thing for sexual reproductive health rights. You have the right to life in Malawi, and the limitation on the right to life in Malawi is for the death penalty, but we know that there is a debate already that is happening. You have the right to human dignity, and the way that it's framed is that includes freedom from torture. It also includes personal security. So this is where we talk about freedom from violence. You have the right to privacy, and then you have family and marriage rights, including free and full consent for marriage. And this provision also talks about the age of marriage being 18. Which also means that when we're talking in terms of sexual reproductive health rights, issues relating to child marriages are also catered for under this. In Malawi, you also have the right to a safe and healthy environment. These are also things that you can talk about when it comes to sexual reproductive health rights. You have children's rights, and the way it's framed, it says that in every decision, in everything, the best interest of the child shall be paramount. And this includes also the right to protection from exploitation and the right to protection from harm. You'll see when it comes to adolescents and access to healthcare, how this is very then important, because if children have the right to protection from harm, the argument would be that realizing their sexual reproductive health rights helps to protect them from harm. You also have specific provisions that mention women's right to equality. So in the CEDAW committee has said in one of their guiding papers that when the law puts barriers and obstacles on access to services that only women want, that amounts to discrimination. So this is something that then is important when it comes to sexual reproductive health rights. Malawi also has the right to development, and the way it's framed is that this also includes the elimination of social inequalities. So if there are barriers to access to sexual health or reproductive health care that are based on position of people in society, then that means that the right to development is also implicated. Then other rights, access to information, that I've already mentioned how important access to information is, and the right to an effective remedy. So the right to an effective remedy simply means that if something happens to you, you have to be able to go somewhere. The law must be able to protect you. It's more or less like the protection of the law. So when there is violence, for example, sexual violence, gender-based violence, the law must provide that you are able to go and report somewhere. You are able to get remedies, you are able to get reparations, you are able to get compensation, you are able to be helped in terms of rehabilitation. So that's also a very important right that's protected in Malawi's constitution. So a lot of these rights, when they're standing by themselves, when you read them, it's not clear what they really mean. And so that's why a lot of these rights have been interpreted as well through court decisions and the application of international law. As I've been talking, I've been referring to the guidance that has been issued by the committees that for CEDAW, ICE, SCR. Some of this guidance finds itself being applied by the courts during court cases, and that also then helps to explain and to improve the content of sexual reproductive rights in Malawi. So this is the background. What we then look at is what has happened, what has improved, what has developed in the past 20 years. We know that there's been a lot of regional and international commitments that Malawi is party to, and this includes the SADC model law on eradicating child marriage. So some of the laws and legal developments have happened responding to these changes. And these developments have also happened to conform to the Constitution, as I've explained. So some of these laws include the Gender Equality Act. We know, if we do, that it's essentially the law that provides for gender equality and parity. Parity meaning that there is equality in terms of access to resources, positions, appointments. So when we talk 50-50 or 30-70 or 40-60, we are essentially looking at the balance. And so this is the act that provides for that. And the Gender Equality Act specifically provides for access to sexual reproductive health rights and protection against harmful practices. So this act is very important as it provides a basis for sexual reproductive health rights, and as directly mentioned. However, we know, and there are reports that there are implementation challenges. Since 2015, we are not sure whether the Gender Equality Act has been fully implemented. So some of these implementation challenges include lack of funding, even awareness of the provisions of the Act, and the adherence, in the sense that for example, are the government departments complying with the provisions? Because the Gender Equality Act says that more appointments should not be unbalanced. They should be at least a 60-40 balance. And do government or state entities always follow this. So that's an issue. But the law is there. So that is what's important, is that we have somewhere to start from. You have the Marriage, Divorce and Family Relations Act that was enacted in 2017. And I think some of the important provisions in it is equality in marriage, for distribution of property, treatment, violence, and one very important provision in it is that it outlaws child marriage. Then you have the constitutional amendment of 2017 that was done. So the Marriage, Divorce and Family Relations Act was enacted, but the constitution remained behind, because the constitution, although it said that you can get married at 18, it had provisions that allowed marriage for under 18s with parental consent. So there was an amendment to update with the law already. And now the constitution then outlaws child marriage. It also raised the age of the child to 18 years. In 2018, the government also then introduced a revised school readmission policy addressing teenage pregnancy and dropout from school. This was following a lot of advocacy, including litigation that highlighted the issues. Some of the issues were that many people children didn't go back to school, essentially, because the school readmission policy as it was not known. It was applied differently depending on who's applying it. And so at the end of the day, a lot of dropouts were happening. Also, there wasn't that kind of management, including psychosocial support. So the new policy provides for comprehensive management of school dropouts, including due to pregnancy. It also has provisions for psychosocial support. It's not clear how effective it has been. I think it still also suffers from awareness issues, but I think these are things that we can have as advocacy points. Then recently, there was an amendment to section, okay, this is the section that provides exceptions for consensual sex between adolescents. So the so-called defilement law. As a result of that law, a lot of young men, adolescents, were being sentenced to prison for having consensual relations with their age mates. And so, following a lot of advocacy, including strategic litigation, the penal code was amended to provide exceptions now. Then the HIV and AIDS Prevention and Management Act was passed. It provides for the rights of people living with HIV, including non-discrimination, treatment, and the very positive thing about it is there is no mandatory testing or criminalization. This is also a result of advocacy and litigation that highlighted some of the issues. A lot of other cases. You had this case in 2015 where the High Court ruled that mass arrests and mandatory HIV testing of sex workers was illegal and unconstitutional. You had the Republic versus Banda and others, where it was decided that the offense of living on earnings of prostitution wasn't aimed at sex workers themselves, but aimed at those who maybe seek to exploit them. And 2017, an important case relating to HIV criminalization was decided, and the High Court in this case provided that, the courts must always apply a human rights-based approach when applying the criminal law. This was a case relating to HIV exposure for breastfeeding a child. Most recent case, I think, is this case, CM versus the hospital director there. And in this case, the High Court provided some clarity on access to safe abortion in terms of the law when it comes to where there's danger of health. So this other decision is not a Malawi decision, but it was from the African Court on Human and People's Rights, and it is an advisory opinion on vagrancy laws. The reason why it's important for this conversation is that it recognizes the impact of vagrancy laws. So vagrancy laws are those laws we used to call petty offenses that target poor people, and they have a very disproportionate effect on marginalized communities, including sex workers. And in this case, the African Court confirmed that this is inconsistent with the African Charter. So it looks like a lot has actually happened in Malawi with regard to changing and improving the legal environment. However, we still have issues persisting. And some of these issues, we have high rates of maternal deaths, injuries, we have gender-based violence, harmful cultural practices, including child marriage, and we still have stigma and discrimination because we have criminal laws that penalize sexual conduct and status. Some of the restrictive laws contribute to unsafe abortions that leads to high maternal mortality rates and injuries. The Malawi Ombuds has also highlighted serious issues in public hospitals that affect women's health, contributing to complications, resulting in emergency sterilizations of many women. So there are many issues. GBV rates are still high, and we still have issues of access. So some of these things, just to highlight, when it comes to young people, there is what the law says, and then there's what happens in practice. So there are inconsistencies, and these inconsistencies create confusion with service providers. And whenever there's confusion with service providers, it means that access to sexual reproductive health care is poor. So we have had these issues with the age of consent to sex versus the age of consent to SRH services. So Section 138 I have mentioned previously set a sort of age of consent based on the age of consent to sex, and it was 16. It's now 18 after the amendment. But whichever it is, what normally happens is that is what then becomes the age where service providers, parents, everyone then believes that young people should be having sex. But we know that in reality, that really doesn't really happen. And so when you have those differences and the law doesn't then provide for a minimum age for access to sexual reproductive health, that creates the barriers. And until recently, the criminalization of consensual adolescent sex also created a barrier. The law has been amended, as I mentioned, but it's still early. We don't know what happens in practice and whether or not the amendment is being implemented, and also whether that has also led to improvement in terms of access. Other issues relate to women. We know Malawi's abortion law is very restricted. In fact, Malawi doesn't have an abortion law per se. What it has is an offense in the penal code that criminalizes termination of pregnancy, and those sections there. But then you have a section that then creates exceptions to the criminal offense, which is just to say, if it says if a doctor carries out a surgical operation to preserve the life of a woman. So the problem is that there are no guidelines that guide what it means to preserve the life of a woman, in what circumstances, how do you do it, what is the consideration, who makes the decision. And so women and girls who are, for example, victims of sexual violence or incest, because it's not mentioned, are unable to access a safe abortion and care services. And at the end of the day, restrictive laws don't stop abortions, they just make them unsafe. And so then a lot of unsafe abortions happen. So there's been quite a lot of advocacy for law reform, some litigation, like that case I mentioned. But the results are mixed. Parliament in 2021 was set to debate termination of pregnancy law that would have, to some extent, dealt with some of the issues here, but the debate was not had. Other issues that are persistent, criminalization and persecution. So they generally, when there's criminalization, there is creation of a criminalized identity. Even though the law itself might not specifically mention that this identity or being this is a crime, but the fact that activities surrounding your identity are criminalized, it then creates that criminalized identity. And once an identity is criminalized, it means it's open to abuse. So as a result, there is violence, there are assaults that happen, arrests that are arbitrary. And we know that it's very rare that people are actually prosecuted under some of these offenses, but the fact that they are there makes it easy to abuse the law. Sex workers are also experience some of this abuse because of the existence of these laws. So what this does for marginalized communities and key populations is that it affects freedom, it affects the ability to access healthcare. It makes it difficult for individuals to actually go and seek out services, especially from public entities. And also it makes it difficult to approach the police and the state to get their rights when their rights have been violated, because there's always, it creates this chilling effect where you're afraid to go to the police station because they'll look at you and they say you've been someone has stolen something from you, but you, who are you? What are you doing? You know, so whether or not it happens in reality, but the very fact that there is that fear makes it difficult to then access those services. Also, laws that target people living with HIV increase stigma and discrimination, and they have an impact on access to healthcare as well. So the picture there is really like a fact sheet on countries that criminalize HIV exposure in one way or the other. So in Malawi, there are several aspects of that create this criminalized identity that I spoke of. For sex workers, those are the sections that criminalize aspects related to sex work. So sex work itself is not an offense. I know that it's very difficult to, what can I say? It's difficult for everyone to understand how this works, but it's important to know that being a sex worker is not an offense. Sex work is not an offense. However, there are certain activities that are associated with sex work that are then criminalized in terms of the law. So some of them include that indecency, public indecency, soliciting, living on the earnings of prostitution, brothel keeping, procuring a person, and transporting a person. So what's important, I think, for our purposes is just being arrested for being a sex worker means it's an arbitrary arrest. What the state or the police have to prove that is that you were actually performing any of these acts that are criminalized. And it's very hard to prove this because you actually have to have someone who comes and testifies that I saw this person or this person solicited me for immoral purposes. So because of this, what happens is that the arrests happen to harass, and many of these cases don't actually make it to court for prosecution because they are difficult to prove. Some of the offenses that are also target and aimed at sex workers are those other offenses like being a rogue and a vagabond that was recently just declared unconstitutional by the Malawi High Court. So those ones are targeted at people who are in public spaces. And we know that sex workers are generally in public spaces to make a living. Then the sections that are aimed at same-sex sexual conduct, those ones there. So again, what is criminalized is not being it's the conduct and not the person. So being LGBTI is not an offense. Being queer is not an offense. However, what's criminalized are those things there, what they call carnal knowledge against the order of nature, unnatural offenses, indecent practices. There's been a lot of debate about what this means, but at the end of the day, the courts have generally said that this is same-sex sex. So most of the time, you would need to have someone who actually goes and makes a report to say, I have seen A and B having sexual relations, which is also rare. So what then happens as well is that because proving these offenses is difficult, people get arrested for other reasons, just for harassment, blackmail, and things like that. There's a recent case that was decided in the High Court by a constitutional panel, and that's AXTA and another versus DPP and another, which was a challenge to this law. So the court refused to declare it unconstitutional. Obviously, there are a lot of issues with the judgment. But what it means is that the law still remains, the law remains as is, and the effects of the law are there. In fact, there are already reports that there are negative impacts that have now happened because, for example, some health workers would say that you people are not protected by the law, and so we can refuse to give you services. But in terms of the law, remember we talked about the provisions of the Constitution and the Gender Equality Act that everyone has these rights. So it's not lawful for anyone to refuse to give healthcare because of a status. Then the other law that's problematic is Section 192 of the Penal Code, which was used to arrest the woman in the case that I spoke about, who was living with HIV. And this one is like, it says someone who is arrested for exposing someone to a dangerous disease. In this case, they used HIV as the dangerous disease. So the High Court in this case questioned whether this law was actually constitutional, but it didn't decide the question. So what it means is that the law is still intact and it could still be used. And in this case, it was used against a woman for breastfeeding. It's also an issue. So in addition to these things that we are continuing to grapple with, there are some other things that are coming that are becoming bigger issues now. And so in the region, we have a lot of NGO laws that are being either amended or being enacted as new laws that affect key groups of individuals, but they also affect the ability of communities to self-advocate for the rights and welfare of members of the community. They also affect the ability to receive support from other organizations. Some other issues are also relating to laws that restrict activism. So in Malawi, we have other laws. I think the cyber security law, it's good when it deals with online violence, but there are some problematic provisions that could be abused to restrict activism and online speech. So for Malawi, we have the NGO Act, which was amended, and now the Act requires compulsory registration and regulation of all NGOs. It has criminal penalties, and these criminal penalties can be imposed personally on office bearers. The board is empowered also to close or restrict NGOs based on non-compliance with the regulations. This also includes audits and things like that. So this raises concerns for freedom of association and expression. And in cases where CSOs are critical of the government, we know that this becomes a weapon to target them. The funding crisis has also caused many NGOs to close or scale down operations. And altogether, this issue is an issue that is affecting, and it's going to affect us as we go, something to look into. Another huge issue that's happening is the anti-rights movement. If you heard about anti-rights, anti-gender, essentially they advocate against sexual reproductive health rights one way or the other, gender equality and enjoyment of human rights, and equality for everyone. And this is a threat because it negatively affects the rights and welfare of marginalized communities, including key populations. These movements are really foreign funded. It's ironic because human rights are said to be foreign funded, but in this case, anti-human rights are also foreign funded. And the funding is reported to be coming from the US and Europe, from these ultra-conservative groups. Some of the things that are associated with them is the spreading of hate speech and misinformation. They are very powerful. They work through lobbying of our political leaders, parliamentarians, professionals like lawyers, and religious leaders across Africa. We know that some of our leaders have also been speakers or participated in some of the conferences that they are having. So one example of how the anti-rights influence was seen is Parliament declining to debate that private members' bill to reform the abortion law. Also, the constitutional case that I referred to had at least 3 religious groups intervening in litigation. We know that this has never been a thing where religious groups feel that they need to be involved in litigation. So this is part of that movement that we have to also look out for. So I spoke about funding cuts affecting NGOs. So on this table, you'll see this is US funding in 2023. So you'll see that Malawi here received 94 million US dollars for HIV and STI funding, and 29 million for family planning from the US. All of that is more or less gone. And that is obviously, this is a very fluid situation, because every single day we see new things happening. We've also had reports of stockouts or threatened stockouts even of ARVs. So this is a very serious situation. We've also had reports of this causing HIV prevention programs to scale down because the funding has been taken away. So it's something to also then look at. So, having said all this, what do? Do we just put our heads in the sand and cry and say, no, 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 things are really, really bad? I would say, looking at the summary, which is just a summary, we've not really touched on everything, but there's a lot of progress. A lot of progress has happened, and this progress represents what we would call advocacy wins. These are communities stepping up, using the law, using legal provisions to fight for the rights of marginalized communities. And when these laws are used, they also develop better laws. So one thing that I would say is that it's important to know this, to know where we've come from and where we are now, in order to take advantage of what has been established, to reinforce and ring-fence these principles that have been established and developed through the years. And one of the most important principles is equality and non-discrimination. And this has happened through advocacy and through the courts. One other way of responding is, once we have known and taken note of these developments, we have a community that's empowered, or communities that are empowered to resist the rollbacks that are coming or that are happening, to defend rights, to deal with those issues that are still persisting, and to continue to have community-led advocacy. Another very important thing is, as you also saw, that issues are cut across different sectors, different individuals. And so it's important to have collaboration that also cuts across sectors, because essentially we're all fighting for the same thing, coming from different angles, but if it's SRHR, it affects everyone. And then obviously responding to the funding crisis through sitting down and thinking through different strategies. For example, domestic funding, looking at our local billionaires and sitting down with them and asking them, how are you contributing to your nation? How are you contributing to your continent? Those are some of the things that we need to then look at. So I would then leave it to people to reflect, and then we can have a discussion about the way forward. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Tambu, for that beautiful presentation. I think one of the most important takeaways from this is that as NGOs, as activists, as people, we should be advocating for sexual, reproductive, and health rights, which are essential for people's overall well-being, dignity, and autonomy, and the fact that it can help reduce stigma, discrimination, and also health disparities. So thank you so much for that presentation, Tambu. And just moving on, we'll be looking at the lived experiences for different people in different groups. So we've got an LGBTQI activist, we've got someone from the Female Sex Worker Association, we've got other organizations that represent, persons with disabilities. So we'll just be looking at the lived experiences for each one of those groups to see how they have been affected by these laws and things like that. So I'd like to call upon David Gisale. He's an LGBTQI activist. So Davy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I believe I'm audible enough from your end, madam.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. It is with great honor and pleasure to be part of this space, and I should comment that the document from SALCA has really been insightful, and it will definitely be insightful as we mainstream it towards our advocacy and awareness. Just to be brief, the impacts from just not only pulling of the funding, but also having no access to these laws has really put an impact, especially to the community. As a community out and proud gay man, I think it has really put a toll in our life, especially on today daily life, in accessing to the basic essential services, for example, seeking health, or else even later on, if you want to go seek for the law in case of if you have anything. So it's really been of a challenge because not much information is really into our hands. I think something we should also look at it inward and work on it as a house, because such information would not only empower us into having access towards these social essential services, but also it will empower us to engage as citizenry towards sustainable development. So I think in a nutshell, from my case, I would present in that manner. Again, thank you so much for the space, and looking forward towards working together as we raise awareness mainly on our laws and having access towards social and essential services. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Davy, for that. I think we will all continue advocating and having more advocacy around the issue. I would like to also call upon Jivita Sindani. Jivita, the floor is yours. Please just introduce yourself and then also your lived experience.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. This is Juvita Sundani from Young Girls with Disability Advocacy here in Malawi. Especially it is based at Gender Trading Center. Yeah, my life experience on the road is all about people living with disability, especially women living with disabilities. These women, especially when they have they are pregnant and then they want to access social services, especially on health rights. When they go to the hospital, you find that they are being denied due to their disability. They say, why are you are adding a problem on the other problem. So that is much of the challenge. While even the health personnel know that there is a right which is sexual health and reproductive rights, but they do ignore that. I have a good example. There was a certain woman who was denied to receive those social services by the time she was about to deliver. So you find that this we women with disabilities, we find we have a lot of challenges to access to the rights which is in the document. Yeah, so we do advocate to so that these people so that the health personnel should have full information concerning about women with disability to have access to social services without denial, without discrimination, because each one of us, especially a human being, has a feeling to do sex and how and do reproduce. So if they deny that, it means they are denying women with disabilities to have the children. Thank you. So this is my short life experience, which happened here at the Gender Trading Center. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Javita. It's quite unfortunate that people always assume that just because you have a disability, then it means you can't enjoy some of these rights. And this is what we are actually standing up for and standing up against such abuses. So thank you so much for that. I'd also like to call upon Esther Mbite. Please just introduce yourself and some of your lived experiences. Esther? Sorry, Esther?
Maybe she's not
Me.
Okay.
Hello.
Yes. Hi, the floor is yours, Esther.
All right.
So maybe,
Thank you.
yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm trying to just unmute my mic. But I hope you can hear me. Hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Esther.
Hello.
Hi, we can hear you. You can proceed.
Hello.
Hi, Esther. We can hear you. You can proceed.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you so much. Yes, as the from Voice of Women with Disabilities, I also like to share the challenges mainly that women and girls with disabilities are facing when they're accessing sexual rights, sexual and reproductive health rights. As I was following the presentation, it was well articulated and it was well clear that from the beginning to the end of the presentation, I did not hear anything talking about women with disabilities. I only had issues about women, about the youth, the sex workers, the LGBTIQ plus, but they did not say anything about women with disabilities. What I want to share is that a woman, looking at a woman gender aspect, is already vulnerable. Now, when you look at a woman with disability, when you marry gender and disability, double vulnerability. Now, the serious problem is that our policies in Malawi, they only generalize women. They don't put women with disabilities apart from the women as a woman. So the challenges that women face when accessing SRHR are doubled for women and girls with disabilities. I can talk of the attitude, barrier. Whenever you're going to the hospital, the first officer that you meet will start discriminating upon seeing who you are, seeing that you have got a disability. And this is due to what these our friends from Healthy they learned, because I heard from one of the health practitioners who said that in their curriculum, they don't talk much about disability, but they talk about the abnormality of a person. Now they call us people with disabilities as abnormal. So whenever they're giving us help or treatment, they are treated as abnormal people, which is not right. And also, the other challenge you can talk about here is communication breakdown. Now, the communication breakdown is also giving a barrier to the enjoyment of a privacy or right to privacy. Because when you talk of a woman who is deaf, she need to be communicated using signs. And you talk about maternal and mortality death. Okay, this woman, when she's going to the hospital, she's pregnant. She started her life, the pregnancy life from antenatal. From antenatal, you need to be taught what is happening, what is to be done, and what is it that the nurses has done to you, and give you the results for all the measurements that they have taken. But there's no communication between the two because of the hospital. We don't have sign language interpreters. Now, because of that, the pregnancy life is a journey. From antenatal, you go to labor and delivery. In that room also, there is no communication. There's communication breakdown between the client and the nurse. You see that the nurses will not communicate effectively to the client, and the client also will not communicate effectively to a nurse. Now, as long as you're coming out of the labor room with your child, it's good for you, it's nice for you, but how have you been treated there? How could you express how you were treated? How could you express your feeling on the treatment that they have given you? Now, from labor and delivery, you're going to postnatal. There is still no communication there. So this is a very big challenge. Because when you talk of maternal mortality death, we are looking at the issues of the causes of that. That's why it's still high. It's not getting low. It's not getting down because of that. Now, after looking at the challenge of communication, now look at the infrastructures. A lot of hospitals in Malawi, they're not separate friendly. There are some other areas that are not goes on for persons with disability because of the way the infrastructures were built. So these are some of the challenges that as women with disabilities we are facing when in accessing SRHR, which bars us from getting the proper or the right ways on how to live, because we are living in the world where there are so many challenges. We talk of sexual harassment, we talk of rape, we talk of abortions, all those things you need to know, you need to really understand. And the issue of effective communication. Because of lack of sign language interpreter, that simply means that the communication that is given to every woman, for a woman who is deaf cannot get it because we don't have the sign language interpreters. Even the braille copies, some of the messages, they're printed, but they are not printed in braille. For somebody who cannot see, cannot even know what is happening. So these are some of the challenges. But the biggest challenge and the serious one is that in our policies in Malawi, we generalize women. We don't look at a woman as we look at a woman as a woman, but not a woman as a woman with disability. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Esther, for that. I think it's very important that you joined this webinar as well as the other disability rights organization, because we do realize and we recognize as SALT that most people overlook the intersectionalities that women experience. You know, you're not just a woman. Some people are women with disabilities, women who are queer, or women who, you know, face other different challenges. So it is important, and we are grateful that you managed to join us and that you managed to highlight those important challenges that women with disabilities face. So thank you so much, Esther. And lastly, I'd like to call upon Lucy Majawa to give her lived experience. Lucy, I see your hand has been raised for quite some time now.
Okay, thank you so much. I think most of the things I wanted to highlight are already mentioned, but just to add, as female sex workers association have also other members who are disability. I can give you an example in Sanje. There is a certain member who cannot speak, but he's doing sex work, but most of the time they are being abused. And she failed to report the cases because nobody can communicate with her. And another example, in Lilongwe at Bandiro, we have also another member who cannot hear, who cannot read. And most of the time, if we are members, we are meeting, it's only the office, somebody go there and pick her and to be part of the discussion. Because there's other members who are good to communicate with her, who knows her very well. But there's a certain time at hotspot, she was abused with a client. And because she failed to speak, people started to beat her, the bouncers at the hotspot. But one of the members went there and tried to explain to her. Finally, found that the client was the one who had a problem because he refused to pay the money to her. So he beat her a lot, and even the case failed to go further because he failed to speak and understand. So I just wanted to add on what others said. Over.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for that. I think it's very eye-opening to actually see that, in as much as sometimes we use the phrases just, you know, to say sex worker, you find that there is within that category of sex worker the intersectionality that we're talking about, to say it's a woman who has a disability, who is part of a minority group, who is a sex worker. I mean, it's important that such issues come out and such challenges are highlighted. So thank you very much for that, Lucy. So moving on, I can see that we're kind of running out of time. So we'd just like to give insight into some of the litigation and advocacy strategies. We've got our three panelists. We've got Roger from Art Glow, and we've got Women and Girls Disabilities, and Salk. So I think we'll just start with Roger from Art Glow. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Actually, I would just like to speak from the practice-based knowledge. Being in the space, I've been privileged to meet different players. And what I have noticed is that each and every player would want to use the RIGO framework according to how they understand or misunderstand, or according to how they think could favor them or could play a role in affirming and of their own attitudes, beliefs, and perceptions concerning sex workers, LGBTIQ people, and also people living with disabilities. Mostly, when we look at the legal frameworks, we couldn't say that they're a barrier to service provision, because we have so many other policies and also acts that are in favor or that are speaking for all that are forcing service providers to provide services, SRHR services to key populations and also marginalized groups. But what we see manifested on the ground is mostly to do with attitudes, beliefs, and perceptions, and also the narratives that are now in the public domain. If we go around and see what do people think here and also know about sex workers, about LGBTQI people, and about other marginalized groups, you would see that the narratives are only...
She was like, okay,
There are some people speaking up on the background.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So sorry for that. Okay, so you would see that the narratives are coming from the church, and also that they're being fueled by our cultural beliefs and perceptions. So the game changer has been when the people have got the right information, they know about the legal frameworks and also the right interpretations. people have been changing, and also service providers have been changing in a way that not only changing but also advocating for the inclusive service delivery for the mentioned groups. So going forward, I think the law is there. We can take an opportunity in which we are not taking advantage of. And also, we should start forging forward our narratives. We are not telling our stories enough. When we are talking about community-led advocacy, it's all based on what evidence do we have, what stories do we have, what is it that we have faced in the hands of service providers, and what is it that is right and what is it that is wrong. And if we are to take authorities to task, I think that's the place where we could start from, because it has worked before and it could work. And I think that's the only way that when people know, when people and are aware, they respond according to a place of knowledge, not a place of ignorance or of opinion, or a place of a belief or just a perception. Yeah, so that's my take. And thank you so much. This policy brief, I think, will go a long way. I think it has compiled all the legal frameworks and instruments that we have that we can now take advantage of. Because when we are speaking about these issues and we don't have a document that has compiled and also put together in a clear way, and also simple English of all these issues that we're talking about, I think that will be the easiest paper, a document of our policy brief that we could start using for people to understand what's there, and also why they should be providing inclusive services to LGBTQ people, and also to sex workers, and also to people with living with disabilities. Yeah, that's my take. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Roger. I like what you said about not telling our stories enough. We need to speak more, because how do you then do advocacy if the communities do not know what's going on, if they do not know how people are being affected, if they do not know what kind of abuses or how different abuses manifest. So I think it's a very, very good point that you made, to say that we need to start telling our stories more, so that we stand out, we can advocate more, people can hear and people can listen to us. So thank you so much for that, Roger. We appreciate you joining us on this webinar. I'd also like to call upon Doris Butau from WAG to also just give us a few advocacy strategies that we could use in trying to advocate for sexual and reproductive health rights. So Doris, the floor is yours. Hi, Doris, are you there?
Hi, maybe I can talk on her behalf. This is Stella. She might be maybe offline, maybe with some engagement. Otherwise, I and Doris are in the same organization. Yeah, sure. Yeah, because we had plan A and plan
Stella.
B. Yeah, come again?
I was saying, no, it's fine. You can proceed. Just introduce yourself, your organization, and you can proceed.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Because it was like plan A and B in case I'm not around. So maybe she knew that maybe I might talk on behalf of the organization. Yeah, sure. Yeah, so my name is Stella Nkonya. I'm the executive director of an OPD, an organization of persons with disabilities called Women Rights of Women and Kids with Disabilities in Malawi. We are based in Idirongwe. Yeah, I'm so thrilled with the presentation and also understanding about the legal instruments with regards to SRHR. Yeah, I can just applaud the other speakers, like the lady from Zimba, about the experiences, and the other people have shared their experiences with regards to how women and girls with disabilities are being denied access to SRHR. But for us, maybe the best strategy is to make sure to
conduct awareness to service providers to change attitude towards women and girls with disabilities. As you might be aware, in Malawi, maybe in the African context, most of the health service providers have negative attitude where they think that a woman and girl with disability is not sexually active. And as the other lady spoke, that with the experience that they had in the community, where when you are pregnant, they're actually saying that you are adding a problem on another problem. So one of the strategies would be awareness, so that people or even the service providers should be aware that women and girls with disabilities require they require those services like family planning. So they need to be sensitized. We need also to train them in disability sensitive language, so that they should be able to understand that this is a language that doesn't demean a woman with disabilities. And also the other strategy is maybe to have an audit on accessibility to all the health service service health cares, where we know that maybe there's no reasonable accommodation. Reasonable accommodation in our disability is that it should be accessible. There should be an acceptability kind of attitude towards women and girls with disabilities. And also it should be affordable, because if I am a woman with a disability, you should use those 4 A's: the acceptability, affordability, accessibility, and the adaptability. People have to adapt with the new trend of issues with regards to disabilities. So if we follow those 4 trends, we know that we'll change the attitudes of the service providers, because everything now lies on the service providers, who are health service workers. In Malawi, I was just listening to our other previous speaker. She was speaking about the legal instrument with regards to SRH. We have the National Sexual Reproductive Health Rights that have so many gaps in it. There's nowhere where they are talking about mitigating issues of SRH on women and girls with disabilities. So if we can also make sure that we make sure the National Sexual Reproductive Health Rights Policy has embedded issues of women and girls with disabilities, then that would be fine. And also we should also, as CSOs, we should also make sure that we put government accountable on their policies that they have. We are good at developing policies, but we are not good at implementing them. So at policy level, we should make sure also the National Sexual Reproductive Health Policy has issues with regards to women and girls with disabilities, and also it should be implemented. It shouldn't just be lying in the desks of the policy holders. Then on the service providers, who are our frontline service providers, we should make sure that they are aware about the issues that affect women and girls with disabilities. Above all, there should be an awareness towards mindset change with regards to the norms. People shouldn't normalize that women and girls with disabilities are not sexually active. I'm a woman with disabilities. I have my kids, and as Esther mentioned earlier about how they welcome people with disabilities at the hospital, I also had a similar experience at some point in time, but it's a long story. But however, I made sure that I'd advocate that these people have to change their attitudes in providing services to women and girls with disabilities. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Stella, for that one. We really appreciate the input and the insight that you've made. Some of the points, I am taking them down, as part of, the way forward and how we can proceed from here. So thank you very much for that one. So right now, I'd like to just ask Tambudzai to come back online for the litigation strategies and anything you'd like to add on that panel discussion. Tambudzai?
Thank you, Vivian. I'm really humbled at the rich engagement And just to say that I agree, I think women with disabilities, in fact, people with disabilities are often overlooked. And I think the generalization of women or individuals actually doesn't take into account that we all have different, I would say, needs based on the accommodations that we need. And so it's actually a point well taken in that even when we discuss strategies and the law, we also need to take into account how the law would affect people differently, the intersectional issues that arise. And like I had indicated earlier, that's where, you know, when we are talking cross-cutting advocacy or cross-cutting collaborations, it's also important to take into account. I just wanted to say that so we've heard about you know, some of the strategies in terms of advocacy, and as far as changing the law is concerned, the strategy that we've always employed at SALC is the litigation, being lawyers. But I would say that litigation is it's one method, and it doesn't stand alone. A lot of the cases that I spoke about were collaborations with other people, because at the end of the day, what you are aiming for with litigation is just not to just get a judgment, because we can have a cupboard full of judgments, but nothing changes on the ground. So the judgment is a step, or the litigation is a step towards change. And knowing that it's a step towards change, it then means that we all have to have different roles. We all have to play our roles to ensure that change happens. So for example, with the litigation I spoke about relating to changing the criminal law that didn't provide for exceptions for adolescent sex. It was very difficult. In fact, we had a case, and I didn't actually mention the case because that case doesn't have a judgment. It didn't end. But what actually happened is that the change happened even though we didn't get a judgment. What the litigation did was to start the movement, to start the conversation. And there was a lot of advocacy from different organizations, including CREA and others, just talking about how this is an issue, the rights of the boy child. And at the end of the day, Parliament then came in and a law was actually changed. So just to illustrate that we use litigation for many, many things, including starting conversations. And I would say that for that, it's a very viable advocacy strategy. But just to say it's not the end in and of itself, and we can never have one type of advocacy without others. With regard to, for example, when we're now talking about how inclusive our policies are, I would say that this is also one of the issues that maybe we should also start talking about, either through starting litigation or even starting the conversations with Parliament. I would also want to say that we have a basis for continuing advocacy. I think in terms of opportunities for communities, Malawi has signed a lot of things in terms of international law. It's also a party to a lot of treaties. It's also part of the African Court for Human and People's Rights. So as far as the opportunities are concerned, they are there. And it's something that we should take advantage of. And some of those precedents that I spoke about, they are also there as a beginning, as a starting point. And then the Gender Equality Act. So just to maybe also make a suggestion in terms of way forward, the Gender Equality Act talks about access to sexual and reproductive health rights for everyone. And yes, it doesn't actually delineate who everyone is and how people can have the how different people can have access according to their needs. I would think then that's an opportunity to actually go to court and ask that the courts now help to interpret. And when you interpret, then you ensure that you start having access. And also you have the beginning of a legal framework. So Malawi has the Disability Rights Act. But we know that as with all laws, when we don't do the specific advocacy, it also has gaps when it comes to the issues that we're talking about. So I'm just saying that is also an advocacy challenge, and we can start talking about it in terms of using litigation. Yeah, over and out, Vivian.
Okay, thank you so much, Tambudzai, for that. So I think the major lesson that we're taking from that is that litigation and advocacy go hand in hand. If you can try litigation and it works, and advocacy and it works, but in order for you to get the best results, I think then you would have to pair the two together. So we should start looking into doing both as organizations and advocating for both. So thank you so much. And right now, I'd like to call upon our last presenter for the day, who's going to present on the role of the state and independent complaints mechanisms. So this is our guest from the Malawi Human Rights Commission, and I'll be handing over to Mr. Peter Chisi. Peter, over to you. Peter? I think he was on just a minute ago, maybe network issues. Okay, in the meantime, please do make use of the chat box. You can write in any more suggestions that you'd like us to do going forward with regards to the promotion of sexual reproductive health rights. If you have any questions, please just put it in the chat box as well, and we could see how we move on from there. I think we lost Peter. I think we've lost Peter. Tambudzai?
Okay, so what we had hoped that Peter would come with is just, so we've been talking about litigation using the courts, but there are other methods that communities can use to ensure that there's accountability in terms of rights violations. And so one of them is the Human Rights Commission and the Independent Complaints Commission in Malawi. So we hope that Peter was going to talk to us about how to access the Human Rights Commission. But I think maybe we've lost him because of the network. But just to say that these are also the avenues that are there. There was litigation that also opened it up to establish the Independent Complaints Commission. So these are, and there's the ombuds. So these are avenues that communities can also use to make complaints against government departments, or even, so because we talked about where people are being denied access to healthcare because of their status, or where women with disabilities are being abused when they seek reproductive health care. So these are some of the offices that are also available to take complaints. I'd like to just open up for comments, questions to any of the presentations that have been done. You can put your comment in the chat box or raise your hand if you want to speak.
Okay, so we have a comment from Caleb Mujungu. He says, hi, at Alive, we noticed that very many people in Malawi have never even looked at the Constitution or the Penal Code. This is very sad. We are currently empowering our volunteers who work with grassroots on legal frameworks, including the two aforementioned documents. We're glad for the support from SALT, which is enabling us to do that. Thank you so much, Caleb. Indeed, it is very sad that there are people that haven't really looked at the Constitution or the Penal Code. You actually meet some people who will tell you that they don't know that they have the right to, you know, some of these things that are in the Constitution. So you are right about that. And I think as organizations, it's important that we start speaking more of these things, like what Roger had said earlier, to say we need to talk more, we need to speak more, advocate more. So thank you so much for that. Lucy, your hand is up.
Yep. Thank you so much. Fine, it's a question, it's a comment. How can we reach people who have disability in rural areas? Because they are also missing some information. Because most of the time we are doing things in a city. And I don't think in our group, those who are attending this meeting, we are working in rural areas with people who are disabled. So how can we approach them so that they can also know the policies or everything what is going, or to put them in one place so that they can also share their experiences.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for that. If I got you correctly, your question was, how can we reach persons with disability in rural areas? Okay. I think I would like to throw that question to the participants at large. And I think I'd like to just expand it not only to just persons with disability, but also just other people in general. How do we reach people in rural areas? Are we looking at maybe say community radios? Are we looking at, how do we do that? Esther, your hand is up. I think you can press.
Eke, thank you. Thank you, Lucy, for that question. It's a beautiful one. It's true. A lot of organizations are based in the cities, in the town, but there are also some organizations that are based in the rural areas. For example, the Voice of Women with Disabilities is not in the town, it's not in the city, it's in the rural area in Chou district. Now, what we do when we want to, or when we are trying to disseminate messages, most of the times we use the community radios. we use the community radios because we know that a lot of people from the communities or from the rural areas, they have access to the community radios. So we use that. And also secondly, in our catchment areas, we even use the church leaders or the community leaders, the chiefs, to disseminate messages. Whenever they're having like a meeting as at the church, at the group level or at the chief level, whenever they're having meetings, we talk to the leaders, to the community leaders, to use that as a chance of disseminating message on issues of disability and women and girls with disabilities. Because you know that in these areas or in these places, whenever the chiefs are calling for a meeting, there are a lot of people who come to listen to what the chief wants to talk about. So when they talk issues of disability in these groups, we have seen that it's more effective and it's a successful way of getting into the deepest of the rural areas from our communities. Even using the church leaders. The church leaders, we do disseminate the message to them, and whenever they're having the congregation, they will have time to talk about issues of disability. So that is what we are trying, that is what we are doing as Voice of with Disabilities, reaching people, even to those who are from the hard to reach areas. But I know we have not looked at the aspect of sex workers and disability. We haven't married the two at once. That is what I've learned from here. I think we need to take a step on how we can reach women and girls with disabilities who are into sex worker, because it's their right, and they also need to be protected. So as a woman, the woman with disability has also to enjoy all the rights that is given to her. So I think thank you for that. We've learned that, and we'll look into that and see how we can work together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Esther. We do have a comment as well in the chat box from Caleb. He says there was a question on reaching rural areas. Alive is predominantly reaching rural LGBTQ persons through building movements. So far, we have 10 movements. We strive to include LGBTQ persons with disabilities. We're also trying to empower them economically, since this is a big vacuum for all LGBTQ persons. And then Blessing says, hi, it's Jessie Moyo. I just want to add up on what Lucy said, that KPs and people in rural areas are not able to reach out to these services, which is because they don't know where to go with their issues. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that as well, Blessings. Yes? Oh, okay. You know, the community radios, because one about mindset change, changing the perceptions of people. And if you're able to reach out to leaders, then you have, you know, you have reached out to people who the community members look up to. You know, we overlook how much power community leaders, chiefs, and, you know, all those people have in communities, especially within rural areas. You know, when you go there and you say the chief wants to speak to you, especially in Malawi, it's very, very, it becomes a big deal. everyone gathers to listen to the chief, or everyone gathers to listen to the community leader. So I really like what you said about your organization using, the leaders, the chiefs, to disseminate this these information that we're trying to, communicate to the rural areas. So thank you very much for that. If we have any other questions, comments, you can raise your hand up. Just for the last 2 minutes. I can see that we've gone past our time. We're supposed to end at 12:30. So the last comment says, donors should be flexible to fund community-based organizations. Most of donor requirements suffocate CBOs. That's okay. That's from Prince Shao. Okay, that's a valid point to say donors should also look into funding community-based organizations. That's true. Thank you for that. Do we have any last comment? Davy, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you very much again for such an insightful space. If I may propose, in line with capacitating or raising awareness, I think one of the underlying factors is also not knowing the power of influencers, community influencers, and how we can use them towards creating more or less of a trainers program that will still be sufficient within our community. So mine would be more of a comment, but also a proposal to say if you could think within those lines in training in line with the community, with the non-governmental organizations that are on the ground working. Through them, if we can get those capacity building trainings that will deploy these community influencers towards raising awareness also would be of a good idea. If I may submit, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Davy, for that. I will take that as the last word for the day. I'd like to just say a special thank you to each and every one of you for joining this webinar. You've taken your time, you've taken your efforts, you've taken your energy to participate with us, and we're really grateful for that. We're also grateful to our partners for co-hosting the webinar with us, ArtGlow and WAG. Thank you so much for your time, and have a beautiful day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.